We're going to do this again. I do not like this shirt at all. It's awful. Give me 30 seconds. I'm going to change this fucking shirt. Yeah, it's awful. I mean, I ran
we'll retake.
Changed the shirt. And it's like awful. I'll be right back.
Take two. Don't worry about it. No worries. I expected it to be hectic, Ryan. I think I'm going to keep that as the intro, though, if you don't mind. I think it was quite a funny intro. And then we just quick cut. You want to go from the top?
Yeah, from the top.
Let's go from the top. All right, wicked. I've got too big a grin on my face now, Brian. I'll try and tone it down a bit.
I'm ready to go.
Right, let's shoot. Right, straight from the top. Okay, so today I'm very excited to be kicking off our first video from Months in Motion with a very special guest, somebody I've had the pleasure of knowing for almost 3 years. First meeting at Paradigms in Lisbon, where we sat down and had a dinner in the beautiful internal gardens of Stufa Fria. Since then, we've met again in Rome.
On the what?
And
on the what? The gardens, what's it called?
Stufa Fria.
The Stufa Fria, yeah. That was
Stufa Fria. That's my Portuguese pronunciation coming out. Since then, we had the pleasure of meeting again in Rome, and then obviously that fantastic event that we organised together in Lisbon for Web Summit. So yeah, super honoured to have Brian Collins here today, Chief Creative Officer, Co-Founder of Collins Design Transformation Agency. Brian, thank you so much for jumping on with me today. It's great to have you here. And I won't go over those accolades because we've already had that conversation. I think we just jump straight in, Brian.
The accolades are from the past. I'm really interested in today and tomorrow.
Perfect. Well, a lot of questions are revolving around that. So I'm really excited to dive straight in. So one of the first things I want to say is the reason why I love Collins' work so much is because you actually challenge the norms of traditional advertising and go against the grain. There's so many brands out there nowadays that claim to disrupt, claim to be brave, claim to be daring, whatever buzzword you want to stick on it, they like to throw it around, yet they stick to doing the same boring shit, quite honestly. Equinox is one of my favorite examples of this, of pushing a brand to do something that really makes them stand out. I would love to know, how do Collins use motion to push the boundaries of a brand and warp what's possible and make brands stand out?
I think there's a large question about motion, that how do we use it or how does anybody else use it? Those are important questions, and those are ones that we deal with every day. But there's a bigger question. It is, what's the role of now motion, which is now ubiquitous, in creating meaning and creating relevance for the work that we do, right? So, I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm writing about it now. And I think what's happened in the last, what's happened in the last decade, but it's really coming to the fore within the last 4 or 5 years, is brand behavior is motion behavior, and motion behavior is brand behavior. So it will no longer be the department or the function or people who are good at this. It will be the profession. Period. Just the way digital changed things, the way interaction design, they're interaction designers. If you can't be a designer without understanding UX and UI, it's not possible, or have a real appreciation for it. So more than ever, motion will be the defining value of craft, on top of all the other kinds of things like form, typography, color, all the bricks. The whole thing has, let me back up for just a second. The whole thing is dramatically change. And the other thing that's really interesting is, unlike, say, in technology advances before, where a lot of the technological frontiers were in education or in research and development at universities, now it will not be led by education. It will not be led by teachers. It will not be led by schools. This frontier will be led by studios. Absolutely by studios, because we're on the forefront of this change. So because we're the ones who are working with the technologies, we're the ones working with the tools, and we're the ones who are working with the craftspeople and our clients to figure out what this future is going to look like. So we're inventing it right now. This is all new. And it's also at the same time, while motion is happening, at the same time, AI is coming in to just explode the possibilities of all of this. So this is not motion design. It's going to be called design, period. Because that's where everything is now moving. It's been going there, as I said, for 10 years. It's now, in the last 2 years, it's only been accelerated. Then with the influence of AI and the ability on top of this to create real-time rendering, we're not just creating small sequences or anecdotal, something here moves, something here moves. The entire world will be moving, and AI motion behavior, design, and real-time rendering will be creating infinite playgrounds and infinite worlds constantly. So I think this is a brilliant time to be involved with motion behavior because we're pioneering the future right now.
That's great. So you see it as just becoming as integrated into absolutely everything that we do, essentially.
I don't see it just being integrated. I see it as leading. Now, here's what's going to happen. Like everything, motion will be the filter for legitimacy, meaning that you're either going to be really, really good or you're going to be crap. You're going to make cheap movies or you're going to make cinematography. Because what technology does, and people are like, oh, AI is going to change everything. No, what it's going to do, it's going to make the people who are bad worse, and it's going to make the people who are good better. Years ago, so I've been an animation freak. I mean, had I not become a graphic designer, I would have wanted to become an animator. I wanted to work for Walt Disney when I was a kid. But like, I don't know any artist or any kid growing up in the mid-century who didn't want to go work for, was an artist, didn't want to go and work for Walt Disney. So I was very keen on animation as a kid. I checked out animation books when I was in elementary school. There was in my hometown, there was actually an experimental workshop called the Yellow Ball Workshop that taught kids how to animate using stop motion and using cardboard cutouts and brad pin. And we would move things around. And so you would learn how to make very early animation using like 16 millimeter film. And so I've always been fascinated by animation. That led into theater, and that led into understanding timing and rhythm and how you create things to have given the illusion that they're actually moving. I was really lucky. I'm going to jump like 30 years forward. I was really lucky. I saw Chuck Jones give a lecture about animation. Now, Chuck Jones was the genius behind Looney Tunes. And he created Pepe Le Pew. He created the Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote. And I saw him give a lecture because those films took like 6 months to make. It wasn't like The Simpsons where something happens in the news and then you've got something in the afternoon or the next day. Because the lead time was so long, they couldn't do topical humor because it would date itself. Because the trend would come and go. What that meant is they made these films because they had this 6 month lead time that had to be funny without being topical. So films that were made in the 30s, 40s, and the 50s could suddenly be on television in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s because the Looney Tunes films fell outside of time. Do you follow?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw him give a lecture about how they would shoot a scene and then they would audition in front of an audience. And when he started doing the Roadrunner and the Wile E. Coyote films, around which they have all these brand principles of how they create that world. But the motion thing they learned very early on was how you made something, how timing changed everything. So you've seen Roadrunner cartoons, right? You know when Wile E. Coyote like flies off like a cliff and then drops? On the first few versions of that, the coyote runs off the cliff and he then falls and he goes. It was funny. Then Chuck Jones said, what happens if we play with people's expectations? We contradict them. So this is what he does. And they do it as a joke. So instead of going, they do this. He runs off the cliff and it goes. He waits for 2 seconds. Right at the moment you think you're going to hear the boom, you don't. It's like, what? And just at the moment your brain said, oh, there's not going to be a boom, he teases you. And it goes, and the audience lost their shit. And they start laughing hysterically because what's happening is the timing is playing with your expectations, right? So humor is really important here. That's an old joke. I once knew a man with a wooden leg named John. Well, what was the name of his other leg? It's a stupid joke. But that contradiction of expectation is, see what you're laughing now? That's the stupidest joke. Or this morning, a colleague of mine, we were up early because they wanted to go for a run. They came back and someone said to somebody else, I'm sorry, have you taken a shower? I said, no, why? Is one missing? That's the joke. It's the stupidest.
These are dad jokes coming in full force.
Dad jokes. Well, what dad jokes do, and they're dad jokes and stupid jokes. The funny thing is between what your expectation is, right, and then the contradiction of your expectation, what happens is a synapse, your brain fires off because you think you're going this way, but you're going this way. Now, that's weird to be talking about jokes when you're talking about motion, but that's what it is. You think you're going to go here, but it goes here. You think it's going to go here, it's going to go here. And so what you've got to do is study how people like Disney, how people like Chuck Jones created. All that is motion with story. And what I fear, and I see it everywhere now, in motion designers and graphic designers, doing moving or doing and doing this, I'm like, it's awful. You've got to understand the relationship between motion and story. And then on top of this, you better understand, or because we're trying, the relationship between motion, story, and music and sound. So what we're actually becoming is filmmakers. Jean Cocteau in the early part of the 20th century said, the language of the 20th century is film. And the minute making a film will be as inexpensive as using a pen or a pencil, filmmaking will not just be in the language of filmmakers, but will become the language of everybody. So we're on the cusp right now because actually making a film is inexpensive as this pen, because we have this. So that's where we are. And when everyone starts making these things, what's going to happen is this world's going to be filled with garbage. So therefore, people who are masterful, who understand rhythm, storytelling, music, pacing, theater, opera, filmmaking, cinematography, the ones who become students of this craft will be the ones who excel, because most of the stuff, AI generated or not, is going to be pretty awful. And so what you'll end up getting is you're going to have a great divide, I think. You have people who are just churning stuff out and it'll smell really bad and the world will be filled with it. And then there'll be people who will be able to know how to make this stuff sing. And so I'm seeing a lot of really good people knowing how to make this stuff sing.
Totally. I think it's that increase now for a need of actual, like, a good critical eye, right? Like it's so easy now to pump out content, to put out crap stuff.
But if you can't sit in a lecture, and you can see Chuck Jones talk about this and animators talk about this, if you don't have an appreciation for that kind of timing and that kind of rhythm, then just get out and leave it to the AI to take care of, because it'll be just as good as you. AI has eliminated the craft moat that used to separate people who were designers and creators from the people who are not. That craft moat, making it look polished and finished, that moat is gone. AI's replaced it. So now you have to have skills in craft. I mean, you have to have skills in storytelling, rhythm, pacing, visuality, knowledge of typography. And basically, your knowledge of your craft is going to push it far beyond what AI can do. If not, use AI as an engine to make your work even better.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. I wrote an article recently on that, about talking about it's more about the using it as a tool to enhance the creativity. You still need that design eye at the start, at the end of it. But what you were just saying now, actually, about understanding sound, opera, quite leads on nicely to the next question that I had for you, which was around the work that your team did for San Francisco Symphony. I remember seeing this for the first time at Paradigms when you talked through it, and I think it's an amazing example of how the core principles of the industry of a brand, what a brand are about, can be translated into motion itself. But I think one thing I was really curious to hear from you is, obviously, with it being orchestral, quite an, not old school, but quite, they've been around for a long time, this company. How did you kind of modernize? How did you approach modernizing them into motion without losing the roots of its classical history? I think that's something that I've found quite interesting when I looked at that project.
Well, I think it's important for anyone who wants this. It's on our take a look at it. It's on our website at wearecollins.com under Symphony. And you'll have to take a look at all the people who worked on this, which included Louis Michelet, Ben Crick, Thomas Markivikius on our team, Eric Park. The people who worked on that's not a 2-month knock it out. That's a 2-year project. We worked very, very closely with the symphony and their new artistic director, who came in to make that organization more part of the future than the past, while retaining the elements of a symphony that people love. How do you position it so it feels relevant for the 21st century? And then how do you bring along not only the communities who've gone to the symphony for generations, but also how do you reach out to people who are in their teens and in their 20s for whom symphonic music is actually a key part of their lives, but they just don't realize it, whether it's, and mostly through things like the movies, which is where people often hear symphonic music. So we had to create a place where we were deeply connected to its legacy, but also deeply inviting toward its future. And the other thing we began to recognize is that I see this all the time with arts organizations, is they compare themselves to other arts organizations. Oh, this is what they're doing in Berlin, or this is what they're doing in Australia, or this is what they're doing in Brazil, or this is what they're doing in London. Like, no one who's in the Bay Area is right now wondering whether or not they're going to go and listen to something from a symphony in Berlin or the San Francisco Symphony. Their options are, what do I want to do this weekend? Do I want to go to a soccer game? Do I want to hang out with my family? Do I want to go watch the new Marvel movie? Or do I want to go to the San Francisco Symphony? So you're competing against everything else in the world that's going on all the time. And if you're not as interesting or compelling, then you're out of the conversation. So how do you create something that you're in the current cultural conversation, so you're contextually relevant? And how do you also recognize that you're in a domain and a discipline that has a history that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years? So that's the hat trick you have to play. You have to honor the past, and you have to be relevant and meaningful for the future. Or we call it, how are you familiar and iconic and reassuring and always constant? And then how are you surprising and new? And how do you work in a contextual moment that's right now? So that's what brands are doing. And motion allows us to do that, because it let us use the logo of the symphony as an example of motion in and of itself. So it moves, it changes, it morphs into all sorts of things. And the visual language does the same thing. So, and we were very much inspired by everyone from the work of Mozart to Stravinsky to modern rock and roll and jazz. So, because we had to create a space for all of that stuff, and then sound and movement, to use that as the key component of an identity for a music, for a community that's deeply connected to music, seemed inevitable, and we just did it.
Cool.
And thank God for the people of the symphony, because they got it and they're incredible.
How was it working with them? Because obviously, again, because it's such a classical identity, like it's deep rooted for a long, long time, transforming that into the modern era, I can imagine like they're not resistance, but how did you kind of approach those conversations with the client to kind of really get them to buy into the fact that like motion was, as you said, it's integral, it made sense with what they were doing? How did you have that conversation?
Don't say you show it to people and they go, here's the idea. What do you think? And they went, that's really interesting. They were a great client. There's no hurdle. They knew that they had to be more about the future than about the past, because if you're not, you just open up a museum. So they were game. There's very little resistance. They understood that they needed to create what the future of their organization and the future of symphonic music looked like. They're amazing. And most clients, when presented with a compelling view of the future that feels grounded in who they are, they go. My partner Leland and my co-founder of Collins, Leland Mashmeyer, when we began, shortly after we began, he wrote on a chalkboard we were doing, sort of thinking about. We were invited to give a big speech somewhere, and Lee said, "This is what we should be talking about," because we're basically involved with change. How do you get a company to where it is, to where it wants to go, right? And the only way you can get people to change, because people love change, but they don't like to be changed. So the only way you can get them to change is to make the future, and what Lee wrote, you make the future so irresistible, it becomes inevitable. Because you've got to paint a picture of the future that's so exciting, so magnetic, so sexy, so enticing, so meaningful, so rich with possibility, that you're willing to move into what that future is, if not eager and not motivated to do it. So when you present a future that is really compelling to people, they move. And so that's what we try to do in all of our work. And certainly the people of the symphony got it, and then adopted it, adopted it with, with both hands.
I love that kind of, I guess, mission statement that you guys have. I think it's a really wonderful way to explain it. Just make something so amazing that is the direction we need to go in, that we have to aim for. And I think it kind of leads on actually to one of the later questions I have, but I think it leads quite nicely into that. I think one thing I wanted to ask you was, with technology advancing at increasingly rapid rate, and this kind of comes back to the first point that you were talking about with Roadrunner and it not being the right time, etc. But despite the fact of how different the world is for every generation, both when they enter it and then they exit it compared to every other generation, I like the notion that we can timelessly connect with any generation throughout history based on what we create. And as you said, it's of making the future so irresistible it comes inevitable. I want to know what excites you about the future of design, and what approach do you take to create timeless work in an industry where we are so full of rapid change and rapid movement?
I'm not interested in creating timeless work. Timeless work, whenever people say timeless work, and it always ends up at Helvetica or Bodoni. Like, really? I'm not interested. If you go back and you take a look at the work that people love, that's in history books, is at the Letterform Archive in San Francisco, is at every design museum, it's the Museum of Modern Art. In New York, it's at the Museum of the Soviet, at the Museum of the Russian Avant-Garde in Moscow. The work that people resonate with is work of its era. So we look at Art Deco, we look at Art Nouveau, we look at punk. You look at New Wave, you look at Post-New Wave, you look at postmodernism. You take a look at old railway posters from the West of the 19th century. You'll go back, look at British music hall posters from the 1920s and 30s, or with basically Britain's vaudeville, all from the 20s. Those things are of their era, and they're extraordinary. They weren't worried about being timeless. They were worried about being relevant in the moment. And so, we have to create something that's timeless. That's great. I'm glad you do. We wanted to create something for the San Francisco Symphony that was of the moment, but looked like it would last for 10, 15, 20 years. We hope it lasts for a long time. My team did the identity system for Spotify. That system worked, and variations of it still continue today. We did that work 10 years ago, and it's still a well that they go back to as a point of reference, and they use it, and the typeface has muscularity, and those decisions we made were, how do you take this brand and push it into the future as far as you can, and you give it flexibility, and you give it agility, and you give it the possibility to evolve. If it's too stuck, if it's too trapped in a box, it dates really quickly. So when Lee and I started the company, we had a premise that in a brand system, and a design system, or now a motion system, or a visual system, or a narrative system, or a world building system, is not something that you work toward and put it in a box. A brand and design systems are something that you work from. It should enable all sorts of creativity, enable all sorts of different expressions that still feel like they're connected to the brand, but you're able to flex and create. Those tools should be tools for creativity and imagination, not to feel you're trapped in a box. Who wants to be the logo police? That's not the right color. That's not the right use of the logo. Oh my God. The world is done with that. Mm-hmm. We need to create systems and tools that, so people who are creating and working these brands feel like they have agency, and they can create all sorts of new things that still work within the brand, but are relevant in that moment, sometimes that day, sometimes that morning, and yet also build equity over time, 5, 10, 15 years. So that's what we try to do. And that's a trick. That's a hat trick. How are you constantly relevant in the moment? And also, how are you also reassuring and iconic? That's the hat trick.
We've all in the industry worked with far too many of those brands that box you in too much, and you have none of that creative freedom, and it stifles a lot of creativity. And I think that it's it makes way more sense to give a bit of a dictation, a bit of push and pull with where you can go with design. When you box it in, then it just restricts, and as you said, it's just stifles out the future.
I'm not arguing for
future-proof for that.
discipline. I'm not arguing for let 1,000 poppies bloom. I'm not suggesting that then you lose your brand. I am saying within the structure of a brand, there are behaviors and systems and tools that will allow you great lateral expressiveness and still create and still hold the center of the brand. We've proven that again and again, whether it's our work with Sweet Green or our work with MailChimp, or our work with Spotify, or most recently our work with Bose, or the work we're about to release with YouTube. You can keep the center and you can be endlessly expressive. It's possible.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that first part of my conversation with Brian Collins. We ran over on time slightly, so we had to pick this up at a later stage. So if you're interested in hearing the rest of the conversation, you can check out part 2.
My image look here. Does it look okay to you?
Yeah, looks fine.
Or hold on. It's just
these are all going to go in that little cut of the intro,
The lens is just a mess. It's like now I'm getting J.J. Abrams lens flares as I'm shooting Star Trek 4. God, hold on. Here it is. What the hell? Art directors who can art direct. That's what I love. There you go.
Perfect. That's looking good.
Now,
amazing.
Good to see you. So I forget
you too.
What was the original question? By the way, it is nice to see you.
Always great to see you, Brian. It's always a pleasure.
I'm always concerned when I see you that you're going to get your accessories caught in some dangerous machinery. And
it happens when I'm eating sometimes. My hands will just grab it and knock stuff off my face. But
yeah, and there you go. And like you're working with a jigsaw or something, and you're looking very closely, and the jigsaw pulls the thing, goes and off go. And there was Jimmy Gordon, once promising designer, once promising motion animation genius, and got cut his
the signature glasses chain got me.
His accessories brought him to a bitter but sort of operatic and colorful end.
Well, hopefully not in the next 40 minutes. Hopefully I'll be safe. So where I finished off, in February's Month in Motion, we spoke with a mutual friend of ours, Phil Garnham, ECD of Monotype, and he had a really great quote that I pulled from this, which was, typefaces are seemingly stretched, warped, and bounced, and I'm good with that if it serves a smart conceptual good. We create to make new, to inspire, to reimagine the world, but newness only cuts through when it serves. Looking at the work that you did for Disney with Freeform, motion obviously plays a very strong part in the identity for this.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did working with motion on Freeform differ from the static design, and how did you balance transforming and skewing the typeface so much while still maintaining its integrity?
So let me start off by sort of saying this, which is really important. It's really important, at least from my perspective, to make sure that, Collins is a team of people. So whenever I talk about this work, I've got to talk about the work of Louis Michelet, Emily Snedden, Frank Leonetti, Tammy Amaze, Thomas Markavicius, Eric Park, Darius Wang, Madeline Kirkhan on my team, Dante Carlos, Yoon Kim, and a team of people who do this. So I'm going to speak on their behalf. I think it's important to recognize that when you do work like this, that it's a group of people who make it possible, right? We wrote this idea for Figma when we were working with the CEO, when they were at a point where they needed a unifying idea for themselves and for their products and the community that they serve. And it was a simple one, which is nothing great is made alone. And I think that's true. But it runs counter to the kind of behaviors that we like, because we tend to celebrate the auteurs, the single voice, the visionary, the person whose name, is on the side of the book or on the bottom of the painting, or when you walk into the exhibit of architecture, it's one person's name. And that contradicts what work really is, which is a bunch of people who care about something and they make something they couldn't make alone, but they're able to make it together. So the people I just named, in particular, Emily and Louis, were crucial to that work. So when we began with Disney, the organization was looking to take things that were familiar to you, stories, youthful stories, typical heroes, journey stories, urban culture stories, romance stories, family stories, stories about relationships, and then flip them upside down so you saw them in a different way. So trying to make the familiar surprising, trying to contradict expectations. And that's what, in my mind, all great drama does. You have one trope and you find a better story within it that you didn't see coming. And so what they were doing at Freeform was seeking for that story that you didn't see it at first, but then it revealed itself. And so it was the idea of something that was incredibly familiar that suddenly became completely new. And so that led us to this idea. What is the parallel of that in visuality? And the thing about typography is it communicates before you understand it. And so when you choose something like Helvetica, the most generic, but also the most timeless typeface, and it's one of the first big uses of it is in the Bauhaus book that Muriel Cooper did for the MIT Press. It's so present, it's almost, ubiquity leads to invisibility. When you see it everywhere, you don't see it. We become houseblind to it. So the thinking was, what's so familiar, and how can we do it in such a way that it feels completely new? So we worked with Monotype, and we convinced Disney this a worthy endeavor and something to pursue. And so we went back to the original drawings of New Haas Grotesque, which is the first drawing of Helvetica in the mid 50s, before it eventually became Helvetica. And when you go back and you take a look at those drawings, you can see the brief. And the brief is make each of these characters as identical to each other as they can, with only enough variation so you can see the difference between A and a G, a B and a P, an H and an N, an I and a J. It's one of the reasons why Helvetica makes such good logos, is you can put any letters together and they all work together cohesively. They lock into each other. And so no wonder why Massimo Vignelli fell in love with it for creating all sorts of logos, from Knoll to American Airlines, because the alignment of those gestures and those letter forms and the strokes and the bolds and the descenders and the ascenders and all of the elements of that typography are beautiful. So it worked, and it became ubiquitous. So then how do you take something that's so familiar and you make people look at it in a new way? Well, you have to go back to the origins to make sure you understand, why was this created? How is it created? And you can see it in all the original sketches. You can see them drawing it far before computers, long before anything that was done using digital technology. So you can see all the drawings by hand. They're crafting this stuff. When I was 17, and I was at art school, I had a typography teacher named Marjorie Katz, and she made us draw for the first semester Helvetica in pen and in pencil. We had to draw it this big, but our final assignment was to take the word song and draw it this big, S-O-N and G, by hand. And then you would bring in the S one day, and then you bring in the O the next day, and you bring the N the next day, and then the G the next day. And she had like a magnifying glass, like the size of Wisconsin, with a little light on it. And she would look at it like this, and she would have a blue pen or like a blue marker, and she would mark where you got it wrong, because you had to make sure that the S slightly went below the baseline, and the N hit the baseline, and the descender, the G. It was all done by hand. We had to do it with a rapidograph pen on Bristol paper, which is basically how they designed it in the mid-1950s. So we went through that same exercise. So when you're 17 years old and you're drawing Helvetica for basically 6 months of your life, it becomes embedded into your kind of neural net.
Yeah,
because it becomes physiology. So and we learned how to do, we had to draw Helvetica, and then we did Gaudi. Those are the two faces, like an American serif, and then a European grotesque, and that gets in your head. So when we took that typeface from Helvetica, we found, how far do we push that? Because we use the original drawings. How do we push it? How do we stretch it? How do we make it both familiar? And then how far can we push it before it snaps? And that's what we did with Freeform, kind of following the idea of taking something and making you look at something so you see it in a completely new way. And the cliche about artists is they make the familiar unfamiliar and they make the unfamiliar familiar. And that's what we try to do with Helvetica, is how far can you push it before it is no longer Helvetica? And I think the team did it, and it's worked really well. You can see it on our at wearecollins.com. I'm really proud of that work. I was really
what
proud.
What was like the breaking point?
Clients at Freeform and Disney, they were uncommonly good.
And where did you find the breaking point with it? Were you involved in that process when it was like, okay, no, we've got a bit too far with this? I'm interested to see what that looked like.
It turns out Helvetica is pretty resilient as a typeface. You can really push it. You can see it. You could push it as far so it wasn't readable, because the forms have become so familiar to us. We know them. So you can really push it far before it becomes unreadable, not illegible, but unreadable, because it might be unreadable. Like an N might be like illegible, or a Q might be illegible, but you start putting it together, and then there are enough of the letter forms to make sense that they might be illegible, but together they're readable, because you read words by how they are grouped together, how the S is connected to the O, the N is connected to the G, right? And so you have the word soul, for example, and the word song. The word soul, S-O-U-L, it's almost identical to the word song, but we know instantly that it's not, because of the ascender of the L and the descender of the G. Effectively, it's the same combination. It's very close to the same combination of words. We instantly recognize what that is because of Helvetica's clarity. So Helvetica turned out to be the perfect choice for that. But you tell me. It's up. I think it works, but ultimately, design's impact is in the audience that and the community that that brand is trying to serve. So it's up to them, and they still like it. Seems to be going strong. So I think our team did our job.
Yeah, no, I really love that project, and yeah, it was what I was really, really keen to ask about. And I really liked how you talked about, obviously, the whole team being involved, driving together to deliver that. And I actually kind of like segues in nicely to one of my favorite the design rules principles that I've looked through that you've written. My favorite one is actually design rule 101, which is design is what we make, it's what we make possible.
Yeah.
As somebody that is very invested in today, tomorrow, and the future, I'm really curious to ask you, obviously there's so much happening in terms of technology at the minute in the creative industry. Obviously AI is the big one on everyone's kind of lips at the minute, but we also talked about real-time rendering, tons of stuff happening at the minute. I'm curious, what does the future look like in terms of what the Collins are going to be able to make possible? What are you most excited about?
I'm still fascinated by excellence, and I'm still fascinated by all the tools that can make that happen. I really find all of this worrying and head scratching and consternation and Sturm und Drang about AI. I've seen it before. And I'll see it again. I remember, so when I was coming up, I had watched as a child the transition from metal typography to typographic system, photo composition, right? Where all of a sudden the kinds of things that were never possible before were suddenly possible because you had metal slugs that you had to organize. Now all of a sudden you could use photography, so you could slam all the typography together, and then you end up getting ITC, an entirely new way of looking at typography created for phototypositor. So all of a sudden you get crazy ass kerning that would be impossible. So that all the letters can suddenly start slamming together. And all of a sudden, you have an entirely new range of typography that's created, and ITC makes incredible typefaces. And you get things like Serif Gothic, where you get ITC Garamond that Apple ended up using. And then you get this explosion of incredible typographic invention in the 70s and the 80s. And you get a typography magazine like UNLC, published by ITC, and filled with the best designers of its era, talking about how this new technology enables all sorts of typographic expressiveness that had never been able to be realized before. And you get the incredible work of Herbal Ballon comes out of that period because it was enabled by new technology, and design explodes. And people forget that when you look at Herbal Ballon's work is only possible, that kind of typographic stuff is heavily influenced by phototypositor. Now, granted, they did calligraphy, and they did a lot of work through inking and whatnot. But a lot of that was inspired by the emergence of new technologies. Then the arrival, when I started out, I bought my first Mac in 1984. I just found it actually a few months ago. Boy, those things are noisy. And all my discs on it. I went after that because like, that's what the future is. And I bought it. I bought the first laser printer. I bought it at the Harvard Coop. I was making stuff and I was working with typography. I was buying emigre fonts, which were designed for that system. And it was incredible. I remember hearing all the old typographers saying, well, you know, you can play with that stuff, because I sent my files off to them. And I would print this stuff out on paper and then photograph it using a photostat machine. And the old typographers would be like, well, you know, that might be hamburger bun, but people always will want, you know, a really good fillet. I'm like, yeah, but this is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I said, what you're looking at is the Model A. Within 10 years, it's going to be a completely different game. And it was. And those typographic houses are gone. Then you have the emergence of the web. And then you have the emergence of generative typography and generative image making about 10 or 12 years ago. We did it for the Type Directors Club. We did it with our work with Spotify. We did it in our work with the San Francisco Symphony, which is basically generative systems that create, you know, all sorts of things that you can edit. And so painters hated photography. Theater people hated film. Film people hated television, right? Typographers hated the Macintosh. And now designers are like, what is AI? This is how it goes. You have two choices. It's not AI, it's alien intelligence. And you have a choice. You can either learn how to be conversant with it and be fluent so you can have conversations and see what it's about, or you can run in the basement and put a tinfoil hat on and hide. We're running out to meet it. We've been working with generative systems for 11 years. And so, so I'm very, very excited about what the future holds. Incredibly so.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more like what you said when we spoke last time. It's going to make bad designers worse, good designers better. And I think it's a really great way to look at it.
Yeah,
it's that
going to wipe out a lot of work. But if you don't, you know, I see this at ChatGPT all the time. All of a sudden, designers who didn't know how to put a noun and a verb together are suddenly speaking like karaoke Shakespeare or Byron. I'm like, where did 12 paragraphs? You can smell ChatGPT all over it. I'm like, guys, are you not reading what this stuff? And I'm like, people who I know never like to write are all of a sudden they're faux eloquent. And I read this stuff. I'm like, this isn't you. This is some algorithm that's putting this stuff out. Did you edit it? So I have no fear at all. I think there's going to be a huge amount of bleh, but there's always a huge amount of bleh, and then there's going to be a small amount of stuff and a small amount of people and a small amount of practitioners who know that excellence wins out. And so I'm still pursuing that. And with the best creative team I've ever had.
Amazing. That's great news to hear. It's good to hear from someone yourself just kind of, on board for embracing it. We're very much the same kind of opinion at OK in that.
People who didn't make the transition from silent movies to talkies had no careers. You have no choice. It's coming. People didn't make the transition from black and white to color when film arrived, you know? So that's where we are. And I want the best of us to embrace this technology instead of the worst of us. And if the best of us are going, that's awful, then the technology will in fact become awful. So we need good people making this stuff. I'm very happy that my engineering friends are making all sorts of incredible things, but it needs humanism. It needs imagination, and it needs insight and wisdom. It plays. Turns out, if you've been around for a long time, you have a history of design in your head. You know, Jimmy, I bet you remember the point where I really love the opening credits to that movie. Can you tell me, as a design student or as a young man, can you tell me the first time that you fell in love with animation and motion, and you said that's something I want to do?
It's a really good question. I never. I would say I never really fell in love with animation specifically so much as just design itself.
Okay.
For
All right,
me,
and fuck you, design. Yeah, I'll back you into this. Jimmy, can you tell me when was the moment you fell in love with design? I know when I did.
for me, I had a big passion for skateboarding when I was growing up, and it was just getting hold of skateboard magazines and just looking at print and looking at layouts and published materials. And
Like Thrasher?
yeah. That was kind of what got me into it all. Really, it was my early days.
Yeah. Well, Thrasher was really good because, well, in addition to all, so the wild style graffiti was also the photography in Thrasher was amazing, right? You had, you had kids, flying through the air. What was called Grand
Hall
Royale.
of Meat.
Yeah,
The Hall of Meat.
Yeah, and those images, because I was working at the time as creative director for Levi's, and so we were deeply involved with skateboard culture.
Yeah.
In fact, I hired a bunch of young graffiti artists who were like 17, 18 years old to come to work with me in the agency. Because what art directors usually do is I go, well, we need a graffiti artist. And then they go hire Shepard Fairey. Like, Shepard Fairey guy, I love Shepard Fairey. He's gifted. He hasn't been a graffiti artist in 35 years. What you want is someone who's hungry and who's 15 years old and is going and kinging the walls in San Francisco, getting himself in trouble. So we hired a bunch of those young people. We brought them in the agency, and we had to make amazing things. Instead of trying to do like find an art director who does graffiti, or like a graphic designer who does graffiti. We went out, and one evening I saw a bunch of kids quietly under a highway covering something that someone else had done, and they looked at me and like, "What are you doing?" And they explained to me what they were doing. They said, "We believe that what we're going to put up on the wall is going to be better than what's here. And if it's not, then we're in trouble." So they have to make a decision when they king the wall and they cover up anybody else's work that it's going to be 10 times better. If it's not, people will find them. So that's what they were doing. I'm like, I knew nothing about graffiti culture in San Francisco. But then I brought I hired one of these students or these young people. One was a high school dropout, the other one was a college dropout. I gave them jobs at the agency, and they worked with me for several years making all sorts of things. So that was really interesting to me because I wanted the energy of people who really made it, not the art director in his 40s. I do graffiti style. No, you don't. That kid is 15 who's just got a cinder block through his bedroom window because he kinged the wall he wasn't supposed to. I want that kid, not you. I mean, that whole community is like, they don't mess around.
Yeah.
Did you do graffiti work?
I was really into that. Was another actually one of my early day entries. There was a game I had on my PlayStation called Getting Up, which was it was like a graffiti fighting game, but it had Shepard Fairey and loads of the legends in it, and it was all about the culture of spraying over, tagging up.
I love Shepard Fairey, but Shepard Fairey has a very particular style, and so when you hire Shepard Fairey, you get the Shepard Fairey brand. And I wanted these kids to get it, so all of a sudden their work suddenly had a budget. They're doing giant murals and like go at it. And it actually good. One of these kids actually became a successful artist and now lives in Italy.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Legitimately.
You have to send me over some of the stuff you did for
his name is Sandro Cicciovanni. He now lives in Rome with his wife, and he's doing great.
I'd love to see some of the work from the projects you did with them. That would be really cool. Speaking of projects, actually, one last thing that just pops to mind on our last conversation. I don't know if you can share anything about it yet, but you mentioned about some upcoming work with YouTube. I'd love to just hear about like what Collins have got coming up in the future, what's coming out, and maybe a little bit about that project.
We're about to release some incredible work that my colleagues have led on. So I get to work with amazing people. The leaders here leading us are doing some amazing work. We're about to release on YouTube some work we're doing with an organization called Muse, the future of like wellness communities called Cadia, and there's a bunch of stuff that I'm really excited about. I haven't talked about this, but I will talk about it now. So for the last 2 years, my parents have been passing away. I posted about this yesterday, and you get to a certain age and people start, your parents start, leaving. So I'm at an age when my dad was 92. My dad was 93. My mom was 91. And they passed within 2 months of each other. My dad's in Florida. My mom was up in New England. And when you're focused on that, really being with them as they get ready to go, then your attention really has to be there. Fortunately, I had the support of my colleagues here who kind of stood by and making sure I wasn't just eating Oreos, because I would get through that. And so I'm now I think more deeply engaged because I buried both of them in October. And so it's really interesting to reemerge, having been somewhat removed, still participating, but someone removed from the day-to-day conversation, and now being back in sort of a lot of the day-to-day work. It's really exciting to see how my team has accelerated while I was gone. So I should go way more often. But I'm very proud of them, and I'm very excited about the things we're going to be releasing over the next few months.
Amazing! Oh, I can't wait to see it. I'll keep my eyes peeled. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for making the time, both the first time we spoke and this time. It really means a lot, and it's always super interesting talking to you. I love hearing what you have to say. I always feel like I
you
learn.
Should take a look at the stuff we're doing with our friends at Electronic Arts and The Sims, which I'm really excited
Yes,
about.
I saw that. It was awesome. Really, what a cool fucking thing to work on a rebrand for. The Sims is such a big part of everyone's childhood. I saw that.
Those clients were they were great, because when you work with now cross-generational brands, on one side you want to be like experimental and you want to be new. It's great, but at the same time, people reaching for Sims for a certain set of values and a certain set of being familiar. When you work with a cross-generational brand, my inspiration is certainly designers like you and other people who are leading the conversation. But my other inspiration is, an ancient Greek philosopher who said, first, do no harm. It's a good rule for doctors, and it's also a good rule for brands that have become celebrated. So you have to be careful about how far you push it, just not like we'd said before. How far can you stretch this thing before it snaps? And I think we did that, I think, really well with our friends at Disney and Freeform. And I think we did it with The Sims.
Yeah, no, I really love that project. I was eyeing that up actually the other day when you posted it. But yeah, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing all those insights.
Hang out with I leave next week for Ireland.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah, I'm speaking in Belfast. Those
okay.
I guess they didn't have. They said they were looking for leading international creative, accomplished, successful designers, and they couldn't find anybody, so they called me. So I said, okay.
Well,
so I think they got drunk and they said, who are you going to hire? Let's call Brian. And so I'm going to speak in Belfast, and I think it's May 2nd. But I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I'll catch you. Jack and I are going to be in Cannes this year. We've not bought a ticket. We're just going to go and try and get along to loads of stuff.
We're hosting Colin's house again in an 1865 chateau, 10 minutes walk from Carlton, as I pop another chocolate.
Perfect. I'm going to be there.
Yeah, it's a respite away from all the techno, synth, electronica noise, and all the headbanging nonsense. It's a place where we can have real conversations. Last year we had amazing people come from around the world, and it was quiet. But by the end of the week, we'd hosted 500 people who just wanted to come and hang out. Wow. In a beautiful garden grounds, 10 minutes away from all the noise. And yeah, so we're gonna do it again. And we're doing it again in many ways for a lot of the young people who come and who can't afford those expensive tickets, and they're looking for other conversations. So a lot of these kids who can't afford to go to a lot of these things, they come and they get to meet amazing leaders. And so I'm really looking forward to this again.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really excited to come and see you and the team again and see that beautiful place. I've seen photos and I'm very excited to be able to drop by and come and see you there. It'll be great. Awesome.
We have no ear-shattering, synth or electronica, and no one. Awesome, man! Awesome, so cool, so.
I'm gonna turn up like that just to piss you off.
No, thank you.
I'm really hoping as well. I'm really hoping I'm trying. I have a really, really special book that I want to bring for you to Cannes. So I'm hoping I can get that. I think you'll really appreciate it. I'm hoping I can get my hands on it. It's back at home, back in England. So I'm going to try and get my hands on that and bring that with me.
Great.
But
I'll look forward to it.
TBC.
Oh,
TBC.
good. I'll look forward to it. I hope it's awesome. Cool.
It's good. I think you're going to love it.
Very awesome. Goodbye, Jimmy. It was good seeing you.
Thank you so much, Brian. So great to see you again. Thanks so much for your time.
It makes sense.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much, Brian. Have a good rest of your day.
Nice
Chat
seeing
to you soon.
Bye, Jake.
Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to the first installment of our video series for Months in Motion. I want to say another big thank you to Brian Collins for joining me today and spending a couple hours sitting and chatting, and as always, imparting a lot of really insightful wisdom. I'm sure you're already very familiar with her work, but I really encourage you to go over to wearecollins.com and check out some of those projects that we discussed, the Disney Freeform work, as well as the project for San Francisco Symphony. And keep your eyes peeled for next month's In Motion. We've got a load of really exciting agencies and studios that we're going to be getting involved throughout the rest of the year. In no particular order, we have got some amazing people from How and How, Hyperfocus, Taxi Studio, and Koto, with many more to be come out. Yeah, thanks so much, and I'll see you next month. Peace.